All right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vice President Willie Lightfoot, Chair of Public Safety, also Chairman of the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition. We are here this evening for our monthly meeting. I say happy holidays. I wish everyone well. I pray that all of your families are well. And we're so excited. We have a lot of information to cover with a very short period of time, but we're looking to get through this information and get an update. We are definitely it's a very sobering time for us here in our community and in our city and across the country for that matter. We are up to almost 80 homicides we've had in the city of Rochester. Of course, you know, the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition has been constantly working on strategies and ways that we can help to advocate, educate, and eradicate around violence and gun violence within our community. We've had some major successes over the years. In 2018, we had record low on our homicides. And then, of course, the pandemic came in and created a mental health crisis, and the pandemic created issues and violence at a rate that we haven't seen ever. And so we have a lot to work to do, but we've done some work that we believe that can be other tools that we'll be discussing today, that can be tools that we can put in the toolbox to help us. We are going to start our meeting and call it to order. We're going to, as we always do, stop for a moment of silence to honor all of the individuals who have lost their lives, almost 80 in this year in 2021, and then all of the ones and victims in the past to honor their lives and their families. A moment of silence. Thank you. We're going to briefly, we don't have many on the call today, so I think we have time to just go around the room and briefly announce just, who you are, what agency you're with. We're fortunate and blessed to be joined tonight with our mayor, incoming mayor, city councilman, Malik Evans, and our incoming mayor. And we congratulate him on his victory and his incoming, and we're glad that he came to be with us on tonight to show continuity in the work and the partnership that we have with the coalition and with administration. So I'll start with him, and then we'll go around the room and have introductions, but I'll start with Mayor-elect Malik Evans.
Thank you. And Mr. Vice President, we're just doing introductions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm Malik Evans, council member at large for Rochester City Council, and mayor-elect to the city of Rochester. So good to be here. And VP, thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. Welcome. Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Richardson. I'm a volunteer for the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, and I volunteer for Brady United Against Gun Violence.
Ms. Dickman.
Hi, everyone. My name's Annalisa, and I work for Brady. I live in Milwaukee, and I'm our Crime Guns program manager for the Midwest.
Ms. Williams.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Henson Williams. I'm the manager of Crisis Intervention Services for the City of Rochester, which includes the Homicide Response Team, the Person in Crisis or PIC team, and the Community Support Team.
Councilperson Harris.
My name is Lachey Harris, councilperson for the South District. I'm also the chair for the media committee here at Rock Against Gun Violence, and just want to make a point that of the 80 that was mentioned, homicide victims, 2 of them were my family members this year. And just want to let you guys know that this violence is touching everyone, everywhere, all the time.
Sorry for your loss, Lachey. Steve?
Hello, I'm Steve Lindley. I'm a program manager with the Brady campaign, and I'm out here in Los Angeles, and my background is in law enforcement here in California.
Welcome. Andre?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Andre Gully. I'm the legislative aide for Council Vice President Willie Lightfoot and the lead assistant for the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition.
Welcome. Shawnee?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shanae Williams. I'm the CEO of Morgan Williams. I'm with the media team. I volunteer for Rock Against Gun Violence and Moms and Men Action.
Welcome. Kayla.
Good evening. I am the Director of Operations for the GIVE Initiative, the Gun Involved Violence Elimination Initiative in Monroe County and the City of Rochester.
All right, welcome. Good to see everybody. So I'm gonna lead into this, and I'm gonna turn it over to Kathy in just a second to introduce our national guest that we have with us. And I will say, well, before I do that, I'm gonna bring back Mayor-elect Evans to just address us and just say whatever he is on his heart concerning this issue and our partnership. Mayor-elect Evans.
Thank you, VP Lightfoot. And I want to congratulate VP Lightfoot. As he mentioned, he was named co-chair of the NLC, National League of Cities Public Safety Advocacy Committee. A lot of folks may not know, but this is a big deal. National League of Cities is a national organization that represents elected officials throughout all 50 states and even some territories. A lot of us in government are members of this. The reason why this is so important is because it really gives us Rochester access to national exposure, but more importantly, the national exposure, access to experts that are working on a national level as it relates to public safety and public safety advocacy. So congratulations, Mr. Vice President. I just want to say that this coalition will be absolutely critical to the success of the Evans administration, but not even just the Evans administration, but to our community. We all know that none of us can do this alone. So coalitions such as this are just more critical than folks that I really can put in words, because the levels of violence that we've seen in our community is something that we haven't seen since like 1993. We broke a record for homicides, but we know that it doesn't have to be this way. And coalitions like this are important because it gives us hope to know that there are people who are rolling in the same direction to try to disrupt this stuff. So I'm very excited about partnering with this coalition throughout my administration. I supported Rock Against Gun Violence from the beginning when Councilmember Lightfoot, I remember we were in one of our chairs meetings and he brought this idea forth. And he started with the billboard campaign, and then it's morphed into this group of a cross-section group of individuals in the community. And that's what it takes, because he could have went and said, oh, I'm going to do this in isolation. But he knew that he had to pull in all of the different people who were interested in stopping gun violence, and he brought them together. And now we're at a point in our community where now more than ever, we're going to have these collaborative efforts to be able to move on gun violence. The other thing I want to say is he's been talking about this trace data thing forever. So I'm very excited about, so I'm going to stop talking because I actually want to hear more about that, because I'm so supportive of this trace data. I know it's something that Vice President Lightfoot has talked about for a very long time. It's something that I very much support. But I think that by us working in a collaborative effort, we really can see a decrease in gun violence next year and beyond. We know that it's just not words that we have to say. We know that it's going to take work. But that work is gonna happen because we know that we have coalitions and collaborations like this in order to make it happen. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to thank you for having me on, and I want to say thank you to all the members of the coalition that are doing this work. You know, stuff like this, to come in on an evening, on weekends, to do this work that's sometimes not glamorous. It's something that people do because it's a labor of love, and they want to see change happen in our community. And I'm just so grateful to be able to be invited to this meeting, but I'm really even more grateful that this organization is in existence, because it allows me to hit the ground running as we take office January 1st with an organization that is committed to helping to eradicate gun violence in our city. So thank you, Mr. Vice President, and thank you to all the members of the coalition for all your work.
Thank you too. And I will say, normally we have almost twice as many people, if not more, at these meetings. I think December, people kind of step aside, and we understand that, but we realize how critical the times were, and we did not want to miss an opportunity to move this work along and forward. So thank you, Mayor Evans, for your attendance and your partnership. I'm going to move up to the agenda, and I'm going to allow Mr. Lindley to share his screen. and then Kathy can introduce the team. And because really, to be honest with you, the real champion behind the gun trace data report here locally has been Kathy Richardson and the advocacy committee. All of you, those of you working on her committee, she has done amazing work on this. The research is outstanding. But I'm going to move Aaliyah Williams up just to give us a quick overview, and then we'll get rid of, because the bulk of our meeting is going to be the gun trace data. But I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity, because the people who are really on the grounds doing these work has been Aaliyah Hinton Williams and her team. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Vice President Lightfoot. So the Crisis Services Unit, unfortunately, we just celebrated a year of being in existence in September, and our work has been hard and heavy, as everyone knows, in 2021. Out of the 79 homicides that have occurred this year, the homicide response team has responded to about 70 of those scenes. And so myself, Melvin Cross, Wanda Ridgway, Leslie Gordon Ogden, we have been working 24/7 every day this year, whenever the time comes for us to be on those scenes to support the families. You know, they've been hardworking, and we've seen and felt the tears of all of the families, and just the compassion and work that the team has shown has been amazing. And I'm just very grateful for them, because I know that I could not be doing this work alone. They never say no. They're always ready to go, whether it's 2 a.m. or 2 in the afternoon. And I'm truly grateful for that. As much as we believe in the prevention and the intervention, we know that even if this happens to one family, they do need support. And so we've been able to connect those families to various financial and other types of resources, as well as just be there on the scenes with them to answer questions, to be a liaison and mediator with the police department. And so we are glad that we've been able to do that work. We're continuing to grow crisis services. The PIC team is growing, the community counselor team is growing, and in the teams growing, we've been able to expand the services that we're providing to the community. And so a lot of work is happening, and there are a lot of people at Crisis Services who are committed, and we're just going to continue to move forward and do what we need to do to make sure that the needs of the community are being met.
Okay, wonderful. Ms. Williams, we thank you for your work. Again, we and you have talked earlier, and we asked about the needs and the resources that you need. And I'm glad to hear that you've got the things that you need to be able to do what you need to do at this time. So at this time, I've given you screen sharing capability, Mr. Lindley. And Kathy, do you want to introduce what's going on here, please?
Sure. So Steve Lindley is here along with Annalise Dickman. And these are two extraordinary leaders from Brady's Crime Guns team. And I'm, in addition to being deeply grateful to you, Vice President Lightfoot, because I do believe that incoming Mayor Malik Evans nailed it when he said, "You've been the spirit behind this." It's your dedication and commitment and leadership that has brought us forward to this moment. So I'm deeply grateful to you, to Interim Chief Smith, to Mayor Lovely Warren, and this amazing incoming Mayor Malik Evans, who's already working on the job before he's even sworn in. So thank you all, and thank you, Steve and Annalisa, and I'll let you introduce your work. We're about to hear about gun trace reports, a key critical need for Rochester in identifying the supply sources and supply methods for the crime guns being trafficked into the city of Rochester. And I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Thank you. And it's a privilege to be here this evening in order to talk about ways that we can look at reducing crime. Now, there is no single approach that's going to solve all of our problems, as Vice President Lightfoot said earlier, but it is a conglomeration of different efforts. One of the issues that we should be looking at is not just what's happening, but how are those people being armed with weapons? So a supply side approach to gun violence is one of the pieces to the puzzle. And the information is there. It's about getting the information from the government entities, mainly in this case, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, into the hands of local police and local citizens and the community in order to have that data transparency so they can look at what actually is affecting some of the crime trends in their community. So I'm part of the Combating Crime Guns initiative with the Brady campaign. I'm out here in Los Angeles, and my background is in law enforcement. So one of the things that is an advantage to working for Brady is that we have a number of different disciplines, whether it comes from the legal side, the criminal justice side, or the social justice side. We can look at the different avenues in order to kind of tailor an approach towards cities, depending on really what the issue is. But what we need data, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So a little bit about the background of tracing data. So the underlying thesis that we're looking at here, and this has been proven in reports from around the country and just from investigations, is ways to that we can reduce gun violence in impacted communities, usually communities of color, and by reforming or shutting down irresponsible actors, mainly firearm dealers, distributors, or even manufacturers themselves that allow guns to move through the system into the hands of criminals. Now, with that, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms traces firearms that are provided to them from local agencies, and they do trace that back from the manufacturer to a wholesaler to a dealer, and oftentimes to the first owner of that firearm, depending on what area of the country that you live in. That is important information in order to identify trends and to stop the trafficking of firearms into our communities. So this information that we're going to be talking about here is somewhat dated, because at one point, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms provided data openly to the community and to the citizens here in the United States. That changed about 20 years ago with what's called the Tierhart Amendment, which precluded ATF from sharing information. However, that doesn't mean that local agencies can't share the information that they obtain. But looking backwards over 20 years ago, and this is probably somewhat true from what we've still seen, is that about 90% of all the firearms that were recovered at crime scenes throughout the United States come from only about 5% of the firearm dealers nationally. So if we're able just to take out or reform just a few of these firearm dealers, it makes a huge impact in the community of the firearm dealer and the surrounding areas, if not the surrounding states, because one dealer can have such a huge impact on the amount of crime guns that are plaguing our communities. The other issue is, regardless of if ATF actually releases this information to the public, they're aware of the information that is coming in, and they do have an obligation that is funded through Congress and to inspect these firearm dealers and to put them, either to retrain them, reform them, or put them out of business. And that's the main reason they can do that is to pull their federal firearms license. However, ATF does very, very few inspections per year, and of those few inspections, it's only a small percentage of licenses that are actually revoked on a national level, even though some of these firearm dealers have a huge problem when it comes to the amount of firearms that are going through their doors and ending up on the streets of our various communities. Again, this is information that is already known to ATF. So if ATF can't take action on it, that's why it's important for local jurisdictions to have this information, so maybe they can take action on this. If the federal government fails to do their job, then it is incumbent upon us or our communities in order to do that. So there is a racial justice component in action with this, because what we've seen in report after report is oftentimes these firearms are coming from relatively affluent white communities, and they're being funneled into Black and Latinx communities at a highly disproportionate rate that are really impacting the criminology, the victimology in these communities. So just here out here in Los Angeles, very few crime guns actually come from the city of Los Angeles because of the action that they take as a city and as a police department. However, the surrounding communities and the surrounding cities are a feeder of those firearms into Los Angeles, specifically to areas of communities of color. So, excuse me. When we look at just homicide rates, not in any particular one city or state, but when we look at them as a whole for our country, that over half of the homicides, gun homicides, excuse me, are clustered in just a few of our cities. And most of those cities, or within those cities, those homicides, especially gun homicides, are clustered in the communities of color, whether that's Oakland, Chicago, Los Angeles, or Milwaukee, or Rochester. We see that it's not only within the cities, within the states, but within the cities, they're clustered in very small areas. So again, a little bit of enforcement and a lot of knowledge can go a long way in preventing this, because it allows the city, the community, the state to take action to prevent this. Most of these dealers, again, a small number of them, can either be reformed or taken out of business, if not by the federal government, at least by state or local government as well. So if we just, and these are some of the numbers that I'm sure you're already aware of, but Black Americans represent about 13% of the US population, yet they comprise 58% of all homicide victims. And that's according to the 2018 Census Bureau estimate. That is a hugely disproportionate number, especially when these homicides are often committed with firearms, and those firearms are coming oftentimes from white communities. So what are some of the things we can do about that? One of the main issues is just requesting this data from the ATF. So what happens when a gun is used in a crime and it's recovered by law enforcement is the law enforcement agency has the ability to trace that firearm through ATF. They, depending on the city, the state that you're in, there's different methods of doing that. But oftentimes it's going through the ATF's e-trace system, where you put in some biographical information about the crime, about the individual that used it, and about the firearm. And then ATF can take that information and, starting with the manufacturer, going through either electronic or paper records, trace that firearm from the date that it was manufactured all the way to the first purchase of that firearm and the dealer that sold that. Depending on the area, let's say like New York City or California, we can actually trace that firearm to subsequent purchases, because all firearm purchases are required to go through a background check process. And with that, we have more data in order to use. But we can find out those trends, whether it's a trend from an individual or it's a trend from the dealer itself. For instance, when California was assisting the Mexican government with their firearm issues down there, found out that 2 people in California were supplying the majority of the firearms down to the drug cartels in Mexico. At least the firearms that were coming from California. Of the 1,500 guns that were traced over a 10-year period, over 300 of them came from these 2 people. So by taking action on those 2 individuals, we solved a major problem for the Mexican government. And oftentimes that's the case that we see in these tracing reports, whether it's individuals or it's the firearm dealers themselves. There's only a small number of them that are looking at the majority of the guns that are going on the streets. So if we can reform them or shut them down altogether, it really solves the problem. Now, there's other action that needs to be taken on different avenues to prevent gun violence. But if we don't stop the flow of the firearms into the community, especially the illegal firearms, then it's going to be very hard to take other steps to prevent this type of violence. So we are working with the city of Rochester. We're honored to be doing that and looking forward to getting the information and to produce a report so we can look at where these firearms are coming from, identify some of the firearm trafficking trends, look at the dealers and either reform them or help the city shut them down in order to prevent this flow of firearms coming in. Now, what we'll probably see, though, is a majority of these firearms are coming from outside of Rochester, if not outside of the state of New York, from other avenues. But again, at least with that, we can, with the information, we can start making a plan for that change, and then push other government entities, let's say in this case, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or politicians in other states to take some action to prevent what's happening in Rochester. So with that, and you have any questions that I can specifically ask? I know this was a very broad overview, but trying to keep within the time constraints of 15 minutes and allow us an opportunity for some questions.
Should I unshare the screen there? There we go. Okay, wonderful. All right, so yeah, I definitely want to, I know that our incoming mayor has to leave at a certain time. So I want to offer him the opportunity, if he has any questions, to ask them first, and then we could go around the and get other people's questions.
Yes, Mr. Lindley, your name is very easy to remember because we have a judge here locally that has the exact same name as the vice president knows. So what's the best practice for municipalities in terms of us making sure that we maximize and make the best use of this data? What's the top two things that you would tell us as a municipality to say, make sure you do these things in order to make sure that you really maximize the best use of this data?
Well, first have a report. Actually look at the data and analyze it and see where the trends are at, and make that report open to the public. I don't want to talk about criminals in a negative aspect, but it is hard for them to operate when light is shining on them. So when the public is aware of it, when they're aware of it, information transparency is key. Once you have that, you need to look at the different enforcement options through the dealers that are putting these firearms or the individuals that are putting these firearms on the streets. That could be working with your local police department, maybe looking at different avenues of inspection of these dealers. Obviously, talking to ATF in order for them to do these inspections and to use their federal powers, potentially either reform or eliminate these dealers by pulling their license. And if they're coming from out-of-state venues, work with them. I know here in California, we had a problem when it came to some of the issues with Nevada, and we came up with some unique ways to look at it that really wasn't law enforcement related. It was more regulatory, but it did help the problem significantly with firearms coming in from Nevada to California. So look at those different avenues and communicate with other politicians, because if it's affecting Rochester, it's affecting other communities in the area, no doubt.
Can I just hop in? Brady has a list of best practices for dealers themselves. We call it the Gun Dealer Code of Conduct. And what we would encourage cities to do is, once these dealers have been identified, to proactively reach out to them and let them know that there are changes they can make to their business practices that would reduce the number of guns that end up in the illegal market, and encourage them to adopt the code of conduct and adopt these business practices as well. And there have been places that have done that in a very friendly way to dealers, and places that have done it as more of kind of the pendulum of accountability kind of hanging over their head. So it's kind of up to the city how you want to go about that. but we can definitely make sure that's available to you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any other questions? Can I speak to process, Steve and Annalise? Like when you work with other, as we know, Chicago, we often use as a model. When we think of process, what would be, from the coalition perspective, from the city's perspective, from Brady's perspective, in our partnership and in the agreement, what is our next steps?
So the first next step is just to gather the information. So in talking with the police department, sometimes the data comes in from ATF in haphazard ways. It's not the police department's fault. It's just, that's sometimes the nuance of getting too much data in is actually looking how to process it and making sure that information is going to at least a central point so it can be analyzed. In this case, that information is housed in basically two locations, somewhere within the police department, but it's also housed with the ATF. So depending on what the police department can do to bring that information together, we can always request it, or the police department can request it from ATF for, let's say, data for the last 5 years in order to be able to analyze that. But getting the information in the right hands to analyze it is oftentimes the best process and key in order to see where the problem is actually coming from.
Are these reports typically, are they one time? Because I know we refer to the Chicago report. Are they annual? And what does the public facing piece look like as far as making everything transparent?
So that's really up to you and what you would like to see. It is time consuming and there is effort to go into this. But if you just look at how expensive a shooting is or a homicide is, just insure dollars and cents. You're talking maybe $1 million, $1.5 million, not even talking about the toll that it takes in the community and individuals. So these reports are far cheaper than that. But that's really up to you how you want to see that and what procedures that you would want the police department to put into place in order to do this on whether it's an annual basis, every couple of years. Now, ATF, went after Chicago after their second report, saying that they were going to cut them off of the ability to trace firearms because they were releasing this information. Now that's a legal issue. That was also under the Trump administration as compared to the Biden administration or the Obama administration. And then you can also look at different things that maybe you can do as a state or as a city. Here in California, their systems have been in place for several decades. So California just passed a law this year that is going to mandate that the Department of Justice uses the information that they have in order to produce a trace report here in California for the entire state. And that can be manipulated in order to produce information for any particular city or community, but also to look at crime trends and trafficking trends for the state. Now, here in California, the Department of Justice also has the ability to inspect firearm dealers and to take action on those licenses. So, there's that ability here, and there are other cities that do that as well. So once you get the data and you have it in hand, whether the report goes out to the public or not, it really will provide the policymakers the ability to look at how you want to take the next action and what's going to be the best action for the city of Rochester.
Yeah, and I would just add, you might already have a website or an annual report that you put out where this could become part of it naturally. So here in Milwaukee, we have what we call the Homicide Review Commission that does a shoot review process. And at the end of the year, they put out all sorts of data about every single fatal or non-fatal shooting in the city. And we're advocating that the trace data should be part of that annual report. So you might already have something in place where this kind of naturally lends itself to be an addition to it.
Yeah, we do have an open data portal that has a lot of data that it traces where are the shootings, what areas they're in, what zip codes, burglaries. It's a lot of information, but one thing that's not there is this data. So I think there could be some, joining and marrying of this data with that, and I'm sure our Nick Petiti is our data guy with RPD. I know that the dashboard and things that he's talking about doing seems to be very exciting. But this is one of the old age questions that, I also own a barbershop, that we hear in the barbershops, the salons. Where are the guns coming from? And everybody has a different answer, and this I think would be very helpful to helping us finally put that to bed as far as, these are where the guns are coming from. And then we can begin to start advocating with our county colleagues, our state colleagues, our federal colleagues, and working with a comprehensive plan around public safety, this public health crisis, and being able to hold folks accountable from all levels of government and from a community perspective, because this will be a public facing dashboard. So I'm grateful for that. So I don't want to hold up all the time. Kathy, I think you were going to say something.
Just very quick, directed to incoming Mayor Malik Evans. Great question. How can this data be used? Just so that you know, Brady had a meeting not too long ago, and we've learned from our New York State Executive Committee that there are going to be two areas of focus for legislation at the state level, and the Rochester Coalition Against Gun Violence will also be focusing at the local level, Monroe County level, to advocate to our legislators to enact a gun dealers code of conduct law that would establish oversight, enforcement, and accountability on the 5% of gun dealers supplying 90% of the crime guns to our street. So I'm really excited about New York State considering that legislation. Brady is taking a huge lead action on this initiative. It's really important for communities of color because they are the communities being targeted by these 5% dealers. It has to stop. So great question, Mayor Evans.
Thank you.
Awesome. Councilperson Harris, any comments, questions? I'm sorry.
I'm excited for the great work that you all have done. Kathy, kudos to you. Hard work. Thank you so much, Mr. Lindley and Ms. Dickman, for being here. And of course to the City of Rochester team as well. I just like to add that the one thing I was thinking about when you think about legislation, once we get these numbers, or actually the data, maybe we can start to push back to these dealers and maybe put up some legislation to add a tax, and then use that tax to combat the gun violence in our communities. So that's another piece that we can think about, and we'll have the data to back us up.
That's right.
I love that idea. A lot of states, have prohibited local governments from doing things like that. And so you're in a great position in New York that local governments have a lot of freedom to be able to implement things like that. So I love that.
Kayla, you are a researcher, a data person, work around this space. Do you have any questions, comments, concerns, input?
Not that I can think of at this time. I know we also, in addition to Nick Petiti's group, we have the Monroe Crime Analysis Center that's parallel to the police department. And they're also working with the ATF to put together a gun dashboard that would have a lot of information, I believe, on both the gun itself, but then, crimes that are committed with those guns. Another area that we have discussed that we're curious about is the guns that are stolen from legal gun owners and then used in crimes, because I believe that makes up a large proportion of the guns on the streets as well. And the other issue that I know we're seeing an increase in Monroe County is the ghost guns, the polymer 80s. So I don't know if that is something that the ATF is tracking. I know locally we have some sheriff's deputies tracking that, but I don't know if it's able to be tracked by the ATF since they are ghost guns. But so yeah, those are my thoughts, and I guess that did kind of turn into a question. I apologize.
So when it comes to ghost guns, at least ATF can, once they get the information from the local agencies, at least we know oftentimes the manufacturer of the ghost gun. So whether it's polymer 80 or a different manufacturer, and that gives ATF some ability to take action. So actually last December, ATF did a search warrant on polymer 80 in Nevada because of some of their business practices, and did change the way that polymer 80 put out their, buy, build, shoot firearm kits. Also, ATF under the Biden administration has been ordered to look at the different regulations when it comes to what actually is a firearm. And that is actually taking place right now in order to address the ghost gun issue on a national level, not just on a city by city or state by state level, but to reduce that from that 80% threshold to a lower threshold, so that those lower receivers will need to be serialized. And if they're serialized, then that means they'll have a background check. And that's one of the biggest deterrents with the ghost guns, is just the ability to have that serial number and for it to go through a background check process. That will be a huge reduction in the level of ghost guns that are out there, because people who are prohibited won't be able to get them because they're going to have to go through a regular background check process. And we've seen that ghost gun explosion all over this nation. That is quickly, within just the last 2 to 3 years, predominantly became the firearm of choice for criminals, is a ghost gun. And these manufacturers know that.
Shawnee, do you have any questions, comments, concerns, input? Are you still there, Shawnee? Or Ms. Williams, any questions, comments, concerns, input? Okay.
No, I don't have any.
All right, wonderful. Well, once again, we had the pleasure of doing something that was very historic with the previous mayor and the current mayor incoming, and we're grateful that everyone is on the same page with this here in Rochester. We're ready to move forward to get this data, to get this report, to make this public facing, and to put action behind it and accountability behind it and advocacy behind it as well too. The coalition is strong. We've done some great work here, and we know we have a lot more work to do. We appreciate our guests, Steve and Elise. We appreciate you guys coming in of your time. I know there's probably a time difference there, Steve, with you, but we appreciate you guys coming in and helping and partnering, Brady, with us. Your credibility in this work is outstanding. We thank Kathy again, all of our members, as well as my colleague, Councilmember Harris, and I know that the council supports the work of the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition. They always have, and so we look forward to continuing this work. Going forward, our next meeting will probably be the third Thursday of January. We will continue the conversation. We'll make sure that we connect the dots and make sure that the meetings are continuing with Brady and the agreement, and the police department. Sounds like a lot of this work is going to be Brady and RPD. We're sorry that no one's here from RPD right now, but again, our heartfelt prayers go out to Interim Chief Smith and his family. He had a loss there, and so we want to continue to advocate for all of the work and for individuals to continue to be a part of this coalition. You can easily reach out to us on Facebook. You can reach out to us at City Council, any one of the council members, or call the clerk's office. You can email us at any one of our email addresses and simply say that you want to be a part and partner with the coalition. Is a table that's set for everyone. Anyone who wants to be a part and has the same heart of educating, advocating, and eradicating against gun violence and violence in our community has a seat at this table. All voices matter and all lives matter. And we're working hard to prevent the loss of life in our city. So again, I'm going to bid everybody adieu. We're 10 minutes. I'm giving you 10 minutes back of your life. We're 10 minutes early. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, peace and blessings, and good health and safety to each and every one of you and your families. And I can't express enough how the gratitude of the work that you do. This is tireless work. This is tireless work. But the benefits outweigh the work. And say if we can save one life, then we've done a tremendous debt to our society. So God bless you. Appreciate you, and look forward to seeing you again in the very, very near future.
Thank you, Brady.
Thank
Thank
you.
Brady.
Good night.
And thank you, Coalition. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
Yes.